Thank you so much, everyone, for being here, starting with Ariel Salleh for joining us today, along with the public, and also, of course, our translators who are going to make it possible for people who speak both in English and Arabic today to follow this lecture. We will be starting with a short video explaining how you can use translation on Zoom. I will be sharing my screen.
مرحبا وأهلا وسهلا بكم إلى هذا اللقاء الافتراضي. نود إعلامكم أن الترجمة الفورية متوفرة باللغات التالية: العربية والإنجليزية. Hello and welcome to this virtual meeting. We would like to remind you that simultaneous interpretation is available for this meeting in the following languages: Arabic and English. لتفعيل خاصية الترجمة الفورية على زوم الرجاء اتباع الخطوات التالية. To activate simultaneous interpretation on Zoom, kindly follow the following steps. أولاً، عليك اختيار قناة اللغة المناسبة. إن كنت تستخدمين الحاسوب، الرجاء الضغط على أيقونة الكرة الأرضية الموجودة في أسفل الشاشة على تطبيق زوم، ومن هناك اختيار لغة الترجمة الفورية. إن كنت تستخدمين الهاتف أو التابلت، نرجو الضغط على النقاط الثلاث التي تظهر أيضاً في أسفل شاشة الهاتف، ومن هناك اختيار لغة الترجمة الفورية المناسبة، ومن ثم عليك بالضغط على زر انتهيت. First, we have to choose your channel. If you are using a computer, please click on the globe icon at the bottom of your screen and then choose your preferred language. In case you are using a smartphone or a tablet, please click on the three dots that you can see at the bottom of your screen, and from there choose the language that is most suitable for you. Then you have to click Done or Finish depending on your phone. تذكري دائما أنه يمكنك كتم الصوت الأصلي إن كان ذلك يفيدك، بحيث يمكنك في تلك الحالة الاستماع فقط إلى الترجمة الفورية وإلغاء جميع الأصوات الأخرى. ولكن في حال رغبت بالاستماع إلى الموسيقى أو مشاهدة الفيديو في هذا اللقاء، سيكون من الأفضل إلغاء هذا الخيار. Please remember that you can always mute your original audio if it helps you, and if you only want to listen to the interpretation. However, in order to listen to music or video that will be played during this webinar, it's probably better to turn off this feature. من فضلكن تذكرنا دائما أهمية التحدث ببطء للسماح للمترجمات بالمتابعة، وشكرا لتعاونكن. Please always remember to speak slowly in order to allow our interpreters to follow. Thank you for your cooperation.
So thank you, Ariel, for being here. I'm going to start with a short introduction to just make it clear for everyone what we're going to be talking about today. So crises can be an opportunity, not in the capitalist patriarchal sense of exploitation and profit, but an opportunity for us to think about issues that we didn't have the luxury to think about before, issues that are directly linked to our situation as disenfranchised individuals, issues that generally don't look so relevant to the conditions of our oppression and exploitation, and issues that don't seem really connected to each other. Land, care work, politics, bodies, economics, nature, feminism, commons, and ecology. In which possible ways can these be connected? Or else, how do existing patriarchal structures hide themselves within what seems to be natural? Roles, networks, connections, and patterns. Today, we will try to discuss these ideas and more with Ariel Salleh, one of the most prominent ecofeminists and reference on the matter. Salleh is an Australian sociologist and a founding member of the Global University of Sustainability. She's a university professor of environmental philosophy and a writer on environmental politics, ecofeminism, and social change movement, with one of her most famous books being Ecofeminism as Politics, Nature, Marx, and Postmodernism. I will start by asking Ariel a number of questions based on her writings and our socio-political context, and we will then open the floor for questions from the public. Thank you so much. So thank you, Ariel, for being here again. We were very happy for the past month or so because we were able to access some of your writings and books, and we're able to go through them and read some, based on which we have several questions. We will start, as we were starting to discuss before people came here, about one of the most, I think, interesting things we are facing in our region, which is the context of feminist activism, talking specifically about what we can call as liberal feminism or white feminism, etc. So there seems to be quite a difference between an eco-feminist politics and the usual mainstream white feminism. How can we introduce the former in comparison to the latter?
Yes. Well, there's two principles, aren't there? There's equality, which of course is what is the focus of liberal feminism, is to have the same and be as far as possible as men's privilege in terms of freedoms and also wealth and earning capacity and so on. And then there's the principle of difference, which is that given that we've decided the patriarchal system is irredeemable, we want to bring forward the difference which we as women experience in our lives and legitimate it. Now, I don't know if the screen is moving up and down, if it's my table or whether is that happening to you? Is it at your end or my end? I don't know. Okay. So we've got the contrast between equality and difference, but rather than set them up as a dualism, I think it's useful to see them as part of a process. So most of us are reasonably well educated and we've probably have independent salaries and so on. In a sense, we have the privileges of the liberal feminists have been struggling for, and we are using our positions, or we have used our positions, you use yours, I use mine, to bring forward the debate, to bring forward what is unique about women's experience and perceptions in a new politics. So usually when this question of feminism comes up, especially with men friends, I usually say, well, look, you've got to realize there are at least 7 feminist paradigms: liberal feminism, and then there's Marxist feminism, and then there's anarcho-feminism, and they more or less run parallel to the mainstream, the male-stream political positions. But then you have radical feminism, which is really where feminism begins and ends, as far as I'm concerned. And radical grassroots feminism is the experiential knowledge and ethical position that we as women have and build on. Cultural feminism tends to be slightly different and rather to play around with symbolisms of sex, gender. And then, of course, you get postmodern feminism. So that's the 6th paradigm, which was very much a product of 1990s, turn of the millennium academia, influenced by French philosophy and whatnot. And in my opinion, was essentially a brand of liberal feminism in disguise. And it was very hostile to Marxist feminism. It was very hostile to radical feminism. And of course, it always used to accuse us as ecofeminists as being essentialist. There was this dreadful word which got trotted out all the time, it sort of like hit you on the head. You can't speak because you're essentialist. And I don't think anyone that used it really knew. I mean, whole articles were published on this ridiculous thing and nobody really knew what it meant. But what it was about was teasing apart the difference between women's socialization in relation to nature and women's actual raw everyday experience in relation, or women's embodied experience in relation to nature. This means it's a bit like going back to the different feminist paradigms. Here we have, again, a need to appreciate that we are moving between different lenses for looking at different problems. So, and it's really important to keep that in mind, because we don't want to get into black, white, yes, no, right, wrong debates, but to try to keep thinking in terms of process, in thinking of, well, this paradigm is useful for this purpose and that paradigm is useful for that purpose, and to educate ourselves to be aware when we can use one and when to use another. And ecological feminism or ecofeminism did start off as a radical feminist community, Indigenous, it was transcultural from the beginning. There were women of color, everybody was expressing their this sense of politics through ecofeminism. But at the same time, ecofeminists sometimes would use a liberal argument, sometimes use a Marxist argument, and so on. So I hope that's not too confusing. A plea for complexity. a plea for open, complex, holistic thinking. Yeah.
Definitely. And I think some of the questions and hopefully ongoing discussions that will take place in parallel on the chats show how interesting it is for us to see how diverse and how important these issues are for us to open up discussions and thought. Another question would come to our mind also is about this line, this connection that is that ecofeminism draws between the abuse and exploitation and women and that of nature. In the sense that we're interested, and I'm very happy that you're the one speaking about this today, because I read this, it was the first time while reading your material that I read a clear understanding and definition of this connection between abuse of women and nature, without it being, you know, talking about women are emotional, women are closer to nature in this also essentialist sense. So how does this connection between the abuse of and exploitation of women and that of nature, how does it show up in the global system?
I sent you an email with a diagram. Might be useful to have a look at that as a guide to walking through this issue. So if you can put it up. Not yet. Glad it's you doing all this, not me. That needs to be, I think it needs to be a little bit higher, or, oops, what's happened now? Oh yeah, something's happened. You have it, okay. Now this is a very old-fashioned diagram. We've been using this for several decades, but it's still useful because it's like an X-ray of the global class structure. And including every aspect of class difference. And if you like, it's this question about women and nature. One part of it is women's socialization as being closer to nature. This is very ancient and starts with the Abrahamic religious traditions. It's in Islam, it's in Christianity, it's in Judaism. And you have gods at the top, and then you have the kings, and these days more likely presidents. And then, of course, by the time capitalism arrives, you've got capitalists, and then more recently, you've got technocrats. And these are the different echelons of masculine power. And then, of course, workers are actually Marxists wouldn't agree, but from where I stand, they are themselves privileged as masculine and as human and as political subjects above the line of dissociation. Now, what do I mean by this? Well, that broken line across the middle represents, in my radical feminist view, the moment in deep history when the break was made from the matriarchal link to the patriarchal, and men established themselves as humanity over nature. 1 for value, 0 for nature, no value. Reason, men were subjects, women and those below the line were objects. The sphere of production, all of these were privileged areas to do with masculinity, masculine identity. And then you see, and until I was, when I was still a student and studying politics, this is what politics was. It was all above the line. We didn't even have feminism when I was at university, really. Not until about 1968. So for my generation. So getting back to the question of where do women stand in relation to nature? So you have this dominant global culture embedded or legitimated by the great world religions and more recently by political theory and even Marxism. And below that, you have the sphere of nature, of mere resources, of objects, not subjects, the sphere of reproduction, life itself, only life itself. Now, I've layered the how shall we say, the beings who are identified with nature by the patriarchal system. And you'll see I've actually put slaves, peasants, and indigenous as higher in the order of things than white mothers, or black mothers for that matter. The reason I do that is because I want to represent colonial politics as something which is much closer to the consciousness of the left and radical environmentalists than the feminist consciousness. So for that reason, I leave mothers further down and then actual spots and so forth. It's debatable, and again, it depends on what argument you are wanting to make. In this case, what I'm talking about here is the construction of the woman and these other beings as part of nature, and heavily, heavily reinforced by great traditions, a great civilization. Yeah. So maybe we can go back and forth a bit on that, maybe just to see if we're both on the same space here. Yeah, you have some queries, some problems, or
I'm wondering if anyone from the public would like to ask any questions about this graph, the details. We can go on anyways. So the next question for us is really, how can we see capitalism in all the context of ecofeminism that we're discussing? How can we see capitalism as having a part in this alienation from nature?
Yes, interesting. I've been reading recent translations of Marxism, of the later works of Marx, and interestingly enough, it seems that Marx himself actually decided towards the end of his life that capitalism was particularly bad because it broke humans away from the organic conditions of existence. And that sounds almost eco-feminist. But from the Marxism that we grew up with, and certainly the Marxist analyses that that are common probably among our comrades. The argument is generally that capitalism simply produced an alienation, that in breaking humans from their commons, from their conditions of their livelihood, they were alienated then simply as labor. They had nothing to give but to sell their labor power, and that they were then alienated from the product of their labor. They were alienated from their fellow workers.
Sorry, Ariel, but I think there's a problem with your mic. Could you come closer maybe a little bit to the laptop? Thank you. It's coming and going, that's all.
Boy, okay. I hope it's not the internet. Is that better? Yeah, okay. Yeah, so capitalism is ridden with various forms of alienation. But the alienation that we are needing, ecofeminists want to draw attention to, is the sex-gendered alienation. And then what are the economic and social of that? So, somebody's phone has crashed. Hello?
Sorry, I'm trying to mute some voices. Are the interpreters okay? Because I might have muted them by mistake. Okay. Yes, please mute your mics. Thank you. So we would love also to talk more about the concept of social reproduction, which is one of the major pillars of ecofeminism. And from our experience as a group, the Lebanese NCB today, who come from Lebanese, Syrian, and Palestinian backgrounds, and I'm sure women all around the world, specifically, as you were saying, indigenous women, global South women, are every day seeing and experiencing how their own work is invisible, how their efforts and the time and the emotional labor that they put into producing every day is invisible. And also one way it's invisible, another way it's looked down upon. So the question would be for us, in which sense can we read this invisibility through social reproduction theory?
I didn't quite catch the last part. In what sense can we
read this invisibility, the invisibility of women's, like social reproduction work and efforts and responsibilities? How can we read this invisibility through social reproduction theory?
The most long before social reproduction theory got off the ground, I mean, it's been bubbling away for a number of decades, but it's suddenly become very focused. But I want to draw your attention to the work of Marilyn Waring, which is way back in 1986. I don't know if anyone would have heard of her book called Counting for Nothing. And she was a former member of parliament in New Zealand who later became involved in United Nations activity. And she made a full-on analysis of the international economy, looking at the United Nations system of national accounting. And her documentation in that book of the rabid exploitation of women around the world is absolutely phenomenal, and it's a classic. It really is a classic. So that's on the invisibility. On Mary Mellor, who's an English ecofeminist, more writing in the 90s and early turn of century here, millennium. She has a lovely chapter in my eco-sufficiency book, Eco-Sufficiency and Global Justice. I don't know whether you can see that. It has a lovely cover from Pluto Press. And Mary did a chapter. She's very interested in money in cooperatives, in that practical side. I don't know whether you would have seen her chapter on an ecofeminist political economy, and she outlines the two economies. Do you know this work? Yeah, maybe you do. I just go over it though, for those for whom it could be new. So she says it's basically, again, a dualism, the economy and its other, or the masculine economy and the feminine economy. And one side is the masculine, as she calls it, the me masculine economy, the me economy, nice little pun. And the other side is the women economy, or the we economy. So again, you see the community sense. And she contrasts them step by step. So the masculine economy, economic man, again, I think you probably can't see the graph, but it's in this book, and I recommend her work. She writes very simply and clearly. Economic man, on the other side, low value women's work. Back on the high value me economy, market value. On the women's side, low value subsistence work. On the high value masculine economy, personal wealth. On the low value economy, social reciprocity. On the high value, labor and intellectual labor. On the low value women's economy, body and emotions. On the high value masculine, skills and tradable knowledge. On the women's economy, feelings and wisdom. On the high value masculine, able-bodied workers, the people involved in the low value are sick, needy, old, or young. And two more, exploitable, the high value masculine economy, exploitable resources is dealing with. So in other words, it's nature is dead, exploitable, a mere resource. And in the low value women's economy, it's dealing with whole ecosystems, with wild nature and protecting wild nature. And finally, the high value unlimited consumption and the low value sufficiency. So that's Mary's take. Now, I've forgotten what the question was.
So I go with the question, but because I want to make it maybe clearer for the public, because one of the comments or questions on the chat is high value and low value based on what signifiers?
Masculinity and femininity.
Okay.
I think what
Go on. So the question is, in which sense can we read this invisibility through social reproduction theory?
Well, women's work are not paid. Social reproduction theory, I mean, it's much thinner than Mary's work in the sense that she covers so many dimensions in her archetype, her typology of the two. But with social reproduction theory, yes, it's critically important, of course. It's invisibilization of women's contribution to the capitalist system, which the Italian Marxists, Dalla Costa and Federici, Silvia, I think you're going to have her here soon, explored and argued and indicated that it very likely contributes directly to the generation of surplus value within the capitalist system, but is never acknowledged. So I think perhaps there are different versions of social reproduction theory, but I think Sylvia's is probably the most highly developed at the moment around that you can get. And she's beginning to link it much more into environmental questions as well. So what else to say? I mean, the invisibility of reproduction in the Marxist analysis or in the radical political economy, profoundly gendered and symptomatically gendered and it requires a kind of cisgender reflexivity on the part of radical thinking men that we are going to have to cultivate. I think the Rojava women are doing a lot of good work in this direction with their men's groups. I think that's something that all of us could learn from. That there's this incredible incapacity to connect the personal and the political. And there are academic prohibitions against it. Mm-hmm. For example, if you're a sociologist, well, you don't reduce things to psychology. Oh, no, that's not done. Or you don't, if you're an economist, you don't reduce things to sociology. So there are all these masculinist disciplines, which are literally disciplines. Yeah. The university's got much to account for, I'm afraid.
Sure, very true. Maybe we can also speak about another of your theories, which is the originary contradiction, which you speak about in your writings. And you expand on the socialist analysis by calling for an embodied materialism, which I think is incredibly interesting, and it makes things much clearer, and things make sense suddenly when you read it. So what are everyday examples of this?
Well, I mean, if you go back to the triangle diagram again, when you look at what's above the line of sorry. Okay.
Sorry. Trying to open. It's the group Zoom. Sorry, it's the group WhatsApp. Okay, share screen. Oh.
Materialism, which the Marxists developed, and the materialism we encounter in political economy, or even in environmental economics, environmental ethics even, is all above the line, but it's all dissociated from the body and reproduction. Now, what do I mean by dissociated? I literally mean the psychological process by which at a certain point in the development of the masculine identity, there is a clicking off from bodily flows, spontaneity. It is not part of the requisite identity of masculinity. I know it's a kind of circular argument. There must have been a point in time and somehow this kicked off and got going. But it's well and truly a cycle now between patriarchal culture and individual masculine identity, self-sourcing cycle. So what I mean by originally contradiction, I mean the contradiction arising from the dissociation of masculine humanity from nature and the body, and attributing that over to women. So what we are doing when we're looking for women's economies, we're looking for a form of materialism that works with the body. First of all, identifies the split as an originary contradiction, and then is able to work with the body. And if we can see those various groups, indigenous and peasant groupings and mothers and so forth, are all involved in reproductive economies. So I don't know, the originary contradiction, it shows up all over the place. It has many manifestations, humanity against nature, economy versus ecology, and yet then you get rippling dualisms. It's as if social life is just continually, the contradiction is displaced, rippling through social life, one dualism after another.
Thank you. I think also if anybody has questions, if you would like to ask I saw a couple of questions up there about greenwashing. I'd like to maybe translate it quickly. So how does, in this sense, how does greenwashing also affect women, and how can we face it, specifically that there's some kind of propaganda cooptation that has negative effects on us, on both us as women and on nature?
Very good question. I mean, it's absolutely true. And we have, we have a whole series of these things. We have climate trade-offs, and we have the Green New Deal, and we have greenwashing, and all this ecological modernist policy is based in the upper echelons of the hierarchy. It's based in patriarchal economics, masculinist economics. And it objectifies nature. So there is nothing in it for women. It's a form of, it's almost like liberal feminism. It's a form of liberalism. Yeah. Yeah.
I also think, because I was thinking about this while while you were talking also. Also, one of the things maybe I'm also suggesting could be depoliticizing the issues. So maybe, like, because greenwashing comes in a context where politically it's clear what the situation is, but the way it works is that it takes the issue out of politics. So it becomes, just maybe paying money for, the amount of trees that you're going to cut, or the people that you're going to, kick out of their houses or whatever. So maybe also depoliticizing can be one of the major negative effects of greenwashing. What do you think?
Very much so. Yes, excellent. Too many thoughts.
It's okay. Another question here also: how can we link environmental justice and ecofeminism? What do you mean, Mariam?
Hello.
Yes.
Hi. Hello.
Hi, Mariam. Hi.
Hi. Thanks for the talk. So I'm doing my master's thesis on environmental justice, and I recently came across the topic of ecofeminism, and I found it very, very interesting. So I'm still doing readings and research, but I would like to hear the thoughts on how I can find a way to link both ecofeminism into environmental justice. If you are able to give some insight on that, please.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm not sure if I'm coming across. Is that still on, or is it still? Yeah. There's no environmental justice. You mean justice for people in society, or do you mean environmental justice, justice for nature, or do you mean both? I think both together. Yes.
The term environmental justice, it's related to environmental violence, or the effects that corporations have on indigenous lands and peoples and nature, in that sense.
You're thinking about also the International Tribunal on the Rights of Nature, which would want to bring justice to environmental subjects such as rivers.
It's so this term is it originated in the States, so it's mostly on like American perspective. But I thought it would be interesting to include other dimensions or approaches to the environment, and one of them is ecofeminism. But yeah, I think environmental justice as in the injustice that takes place in many parts of the world and that affects mostly marginalized people and communities. So that would be the link I'm trying to find.
Sorry, you're thinking of environmental justice for people. You're not in terms of for the environment per se, right?
It's both. Definitely, it's both.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Look at, I did a lot of work at one point on, I mean, normally I think of environmental justice as a fairly liberal focus, liberal ethicists like Tom Reagan or the Australian guy, Peter Singer, and so forth. They basically came out of a liberal framework, but then there were more radical ones like the deep ecologists, who had a spiritual tinge in their perception of nature, and we're reaching for a kind of paradigm shift in Western environmental thinking, but of course they were hopelessly sexist. But yeah, so if you had a look on my website there, it's just my name.info, you could get quite a collection of readings from different aspects of environmental theory, deep ecology, social ecology, globalization, looking at, you know, indigenous communities, colonized communities, and so forth. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. I will definitely have a look. Thank you.
Thank you, Mariam. Following up on the questions, also trying to translate quickly, how were the modernization and development policies used in the environmental field in order to control people around the occupied, the colonized world, such as policies used by the World Bank that Titiba Takaria from Egypt, from India had written about. And are there any information that show these operations, ongoing operations in the East and in the Arab Levant and Maghreb? So Riyad is specifically talking about the way in which policies of development, quote unquote, and modernization were used by using the alibi of environment while being used to oppress colonized peoples.
Very much so. And of course, the whole series of United Nations has been captured by the corporates, the corporate sector, and the whole, since about 1986, the UNCED process, it's UN, United Nations Conference on Environment and Development. And then the Earth Summits, 1992, 2012, I think 2020 or something. Were blatantly colonial exercises, and colonial across the world, not even only on the global south, but on the global north as well. And of course, the more society becomes digitized, the more we're all being locked into this technocratic format. So we've got a lot of work to do. I can't comment specifically on literature in your area, the Middle East. I wouldn't know, but it shouldn't be too hard to.
Not at all.
To do
that. Very easy. Actually, it's an everyday experience. Also, Riyad goes on with an example. I think this is a good example to go on with about dams in general, but specifically the dam that Director Omar Amiralai had spoken about in the northeastern part of Syria. in his book Tufan fi Bilad al-Ba'th, and its impact on people who were affected by it. I'm very sure also a lot of material on Al-Sadd al-Ali, the dam, and the huge dam in Egypt, can also tell us about how a huge part of Egypt actually was submerged, in the sense that a whole population from one ethnic community was completely submerged, and they don't even have one of their villages left till now. So these are one of the big, projects there, but our everyday experience of, highways being cut through our agricultural lands and other huge construction projects would show such a thing. Thank you, Riyad.
On the question of dams, it's interesting. We have a fight over a dam, raising of a dam wall here in Sydney at the moment. And a group of us are working on this. And most of us have been interested in the relationship between natural water evapotranspiration in forested areas and climate cooling. And there's quite a bit of science on this. And there's a group in Eastern Europe and in Russia who have specialized in this, and they have just gone off. They've just come back actually from the United Nations meeting on water this time. And interestingly enough, their approach, these people began, they call it the new water paradigm. They kicked off in a campaign to stop the building of a dam in Slovakia, some 20 years ago. And the thing spiraled, and they began to develop the science of how do you live with water by the logic of water, so that you're managing it, but a feminine way, actually. You manage it in reciprocity at what guys. But so they have developed this. I'll be very happy to share this material with you, especially if you're getting involved in dam struggles. They took this material to the UN, and on the very first day, at the end of the first day, the Egyptians came up to them and begged them to come to Egypt for discussions on how you might develop alternative ways of protecting water supply and protecting the landscape and protecting people's livelihoods without a dam, and keeping that, as well as generating cooling for climate. And we're doing that here in Sydney. And we've, not me, I'm no mathematician, but the guys have costed this. It's way, way, way cheaper and more effective than constructing a dam. And you have all these multiple benefits and advantages as well. Land protection and climate spin-offs and whatnot. Yeah. So I'll be happy to share that. I'll look forward to sharing that with you.
Please do. Do you have any title or name or keywords about this project so people can check it out?
Yeah, well, you could start, again, just on my website, Ariel Salleh info, there's a page on water politics. And if you go into that, you'll find an editorial of a special issue of the International Journal of Water that I edited with these people, with the New Water Paradigm people. The science is still valid. The article is about 10 years ago now, but that'll give you all the names and give you the logic, and just read the editorial for an overview. But in the meantime, I can send you, can share with you, it would be wonderful to share with you more updated material. For example, they prepared a white paper for the UN, which I have a copy of here, which is very publicly accessible. That's a good starting point. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I'm still trying to check the questions. There's a question about the triangle. When we say white mothers and black mothers, that refers not to those within the monarchies or aristocrats, right? It's the mothers in the working society.
Yes, that person doesn't seem to have grasped the triangle. How can I say? The triangle represents like an X-ray of society, with the head at the top and the tummy and the feet. And the closer you get down to the feet, the less people are valued.
Okay.
And below the line of dissociation, which is where masculinity hides off its own privilege to the top of the triangle, and the others are left over: indigenous, women, children, animal, and so on. So I think perhaps we could I don't know whether we need to somehow discuss that a bit more. Is it not clear?
I think it's clear now. Is there any more questions about it? Is it clear? Please, if
Hi.
it's not clear, yes, Rahul.
Thank you. So yeah, just my question was a bit, you know, where I felt like a bit of confusion, but you know, I get the point that, for example, when you say about women like living in the monarchies, or like the monarchy society as they were living like in the 17th century, 18th century, or before that. You know, their lives, of course, differed from the ones who are in the feudalism systems. Like it changes. That's what I meant only about that. But yeah, it's clear right now.
There are historical differences, of course. It's a very schematic overview summarizing the patriarchal split of the split that the dominant global civilization perpetuates in its economic constructs, in its political constructs, in its religions, in its value systems, in its institutions. So I don't quite know how to, without meeting you, to how further the discussion on that. By the way, who are you? What is your name?
I'm Ru. I'm just a political student and artist. And yeah, it's just interesting topic to me, because I felt that yeah, while I agree with you, of course, that they did, like, of course, much more effort and much more energy they spent, and much more labor when we speak about like white mothers or black mothers, of course. But also I just I saw that there's the distinction between for example, when we say about mothers who are, let's say, husbands of kings or emperors, or those in power, in some way their value is not so much as like their power. They exert more power down from above.
Yes,
but
you're
of course,
right. King's wife will have more power than an indigenous person, but on the other hand, she's a woman. It's relative, and she actually, her power is very fragile. As you know, we have kings like King Henry VIII, who I think he had 6 wives. I forget my history now. Most of them had their head chopped off when he got tired of them. In other words, women may occupy as partners of men a temporary sort of superficial privilege, but it doesn't make them whole human beings as men claim for themselves in a patriarchal society.
okay, thank you. That's much more clear now. Thank you.
Thank you. I just shared the link to Ariel's website, the part on water. So you can access what she had just mentioned, in addition to other material on the issues, also on the issue. I don't think there's other questions. Please keep them coming if you need us to ask. Let's go on with our questions about, yes, Let's go a bit more local here, and we can talk about the civil war. Following the civil war in Lebanon, and then the neoliberal era, and now the full economic breakdown, the abuse and exploitation of women and of nature have become very visible. So for us, this is something we have been and are experiencing. This is not something that we, like it's new to us. How can we understand it from a theoretical perspective? In the sense, the question means, how can we read such a connection and exploitation between, how the system is exploiting both women and nature in our context?
Well, in most societies, women function as absorbers for social problems, shock absorbers in cars. Sometimes, so they receive violence. If a man is stressed, if he's lost his employment, or is unwell or whatever, it will often be taken out on the wife. Or women may be scapegoated. Women generally are scapegoats for social problems. And of course we know, and Sylvia's written a lot about this, about the marginalization of women and eventually the witch hunting of women, the hunting of women down. The violence and cruelty on women throughout history is absolutely phenomenal. It still shocks me, and I've been reading this stuff for decades now. During the pandemic, domestic violence in Australia, in an affluent, peaceful, affluent country, not like Lebanon, which has so many problems. Domestic violence in our country increased by 30%, 30%, 30. Wow. And there was, in France, I believe it was 50%, 50%. Wow. And there are, I don't have them with me, but there are similar figures, of course, for South America and Africa. South Africa in particular, has a huge problem with sex-gender violence. And of course, the post-colonial condition of South Africa has something to do with that, the unemployment of men, or the abuse of Black men by white men, and so on. That's a factor in there, but nevertheless, it rolls on to the bodies of women. I love the concept of body territory, which I think you've been developing. I would like you to talk to me more about that. Is it possible?
I mean, this is hello? Somebody saying something? Yes, I think this is a very important and interesting subject to talk about and to think about also as women, how our bodies become territories of struggles, territories of wars. And this is something, in this region, we have been experiencing a lot, starting with the civil war in Lebanon. Even before that, the occupation of Palestine, the civil war in Lebanon, currently the wars around Syria. So in every day, the news, the stories that we hear about the exploitation of women's bodies, both sexual, general violence, or also, the kidnapping of women as token and as very similar, like we were mentioning, similar to the way in which we occupy spaces and we occupy territories and lands. Women's bodies are occupied too. So yes, I think this is a huge subject to talk about and to discuss. We would like to, I think, to go on with the questions about women's livelihoods in the third world. So women's livelihoods in most of the third world economies are close to nature, being bound up with domestic food production. Is international agriculture, now we talk more about policies, are international agricultural policies and ideas like the green economy a help, do you think, from your perspective, more of a help or a hindrance to us in this context?
We did go there before. We did talk about that green economy before, green economy, Green New Deal, and so forth. Can I just skip back to the violence question, because I wanted to draw your attention to it's not only your country, this is
Of course.
profoundly international, in the sense I've just encountered a report published in London on the Metropolitan Police Force of London. Is close to being demobilized because of the amount of gender violence, including rape, on the part of police officers and their harassment of women colleagues in the police force, and the racism on Black members of the community in the UK, in the very police force, which is supposed to be the instrument of justice. There's really, if you're interested in this topic, I recommend. It's called, I think it's called the Report on the Metropolitan. This was very new. It's only about a week ago that it was brought out. There was another point there. I think I've lost it. Yeah, look, I mean, all these policy, if you're looking at policy, you're looking at liberal politics, you're looking at capitalism. So what? Yeah.
No, definitely. And this also, I think we can link it to our discussion last week about what is called the Green Revolution. I think it was always interesting for us to discuss these because of how much very few information there is on this issue, whether we're talking in Arabic in general or what we learn in universities, right? We're talking about a completely invisible, inaccessible field. I was remembering last week, students, for instance, of agriculture do not learn about this. They learn about, like, this is science, quote unquote. This is earth, understanding earth is about understanding chemistry. This is basically it. And when you're saying understanding chemistry, it means, adding some nitrogen here, adding some other kind of composite there, and that's it. And not understanding it as as something that is alive, and also not understanding it from a political perspective, right? How are we dealing with our lands right now? How did agriculture change in the last 100 years? One of the discussions we've had is about how this green revolution and modernist conception of land has come and taught people that have been feeding, trying to teach peasants who have been feeding the people for 6,000-8,000 years. And now they're telling them, all of your knowledges are wrong. All of what you're doing is wrong. This land should not be treated this way, and trying to, change also our connection to the land as peasants and also as users. This has become, and this is based also on all the ideas of commons. Land becomes a commodity. Land is privatized. The concept of the public does not exist anymore, or at least it's frowned upon. And we don't want public, because public can be accessible by everyone, right? We want something that we can only access. So in this sense, I want something that I can pay for, so that other people who cannot pay for cannot access. So yeah, I think all of these go within the global conceptions and the global policies of agriculture and of land and access to land, in a sense.
Because it's the same big pharma companies often that were behind the pandemic products that were also behind the agricultural, the so-called green revolution. Have you read? There are two eco-feminist people, of course, absolutely critical on this, which is Carolyn Merchant.
Shiva. Okay.
Carolyn Merchant.
I was, yeah.
Scientific Revolution, Women, the Death of Nature, Women in the Scientific Revolution, talking about, again, the change. It's almost a parallel to the economics, the change from nature as an organism to nature as a machine. And then you have, of course, genetic engineering, which is another thing to be worried about. But yes, Vandana's work on the Green Revolution blew everybody's mind. And that, again, is already, what, 3 or 4 decades ago now. She's still writing. Yeah, I'm so glad you're onto that. And what about, is in the Middle East, are you joining communities developing seed banks of your own traditional seeds? There's a lot of
So this is a very important issue. I will start talking about it, but please, everybody else, please feel free to also join. Of course, Monsanto and other huge corporate have been, trying to control all of agriculture here, and it is no surprise that the control of agriculture came hand in hand with occupation, right? So Iraq, the whole Iraq, one of the most richest land around the region here, has been occupied, but not only from a military perspective, but also Monsanto completely disenfranchising its peasants, stealing or dismissing its heritage and imposing its own seeds. Very similarly, this has been happening around Lebanon, Syria, and Palestine. But it's happening at so many levels that I think one of the most interesting levels is not only the direct level of loss of the seeds, but also cultural level, how the culture of modernizing has been pushed by the states since the 90s, whereas agriculture, first of all, has been looked down upon as, a secondary, unimportant, backwards field, and peasants are, uneducated, quote unquote, but also which kind of agriculture was the question posed, at the level of which the states had completely forced peasants to dismiss their heritage, their knowledges in the sense, and to follow scientists. So in the sense, we're talking about either the ministries of agriculture and or the role that the departments of agriculture are playing around Lebanon and Syria specifically. I remember working in the field, we were working around 5 villages. There was in 5 villages that are agriculture villages in Marjayoun, the south east of Lebanon. In 5 villages, only mostly peasants, one person was mentioned to be the old peasant who follows the old heritage and the old ways of agriculture. And actually people were laughing about him. They were saying, oh, you're asking about this? Oh, this is the old guy who does this, but this is, nobody listens to this kind of ignorant way of doing agriculture. So I think this is very important specifically for us. And please, I'm speaking on behalf of myself, anybody else who would like to intervene. This is very important for us because also women have been historically the main peasants. When we're talking about choosing the lands to be planted, choosing the seeds to be planted, organizing and saving the seeds from one season to the other, organizing the times of the harvest and other patterns of work within the house and outside the house, and also organizing the house itself to become part of the agricultural activity. This is part of my PhD research, in which understanding space and how it changes rural space, specifically houses, and how women had a role in changing some spaces in the houses, some rooms in the houses, some spaces around the houses, to make them interchangeable according to the seasons, for them to be able to use them, whether you're talking about tobacco harvest or zaytun, olive harvest and making the olive themselves, or za'atar and other wild herbs. So basically, this is one of the reasons why women are the most affected by the Green Revolution, or the let's say capitalist agricultural policies, is because of the fact that they used to play one of the most important roles in agriculture, and recently they have been, these roles have been taken away from them, in the sense that it's men who decide upon the lands, it's men who also inherit the lands, right? So this, I think, also I'm saying, please, other people have other experiences and other knowledges about the issue, please feel free to talk.
Just to add, you would be interested in a group in Korea, South Korea, called Gabaeworm, which is a group of women who are collecting and treasuring their traditional seeds. And I think they even have a little restaurant where they, they share the knowledge of what this diet was and so forth. So you might like to be in touch with them. They might like to join World March of Women. I'm not sure if they would know about it, actually.
Perfect. We can contact them, of course. I don't see any questions or any hands raised, but please feel free to participate. If we continue also on the talking about the environment and the region, the ongoing, or like the recent, we can talk about the recent earthquakes between Turkey, Syria, and that was also felt a little bit in Lebanon. And this earthquake, the region that was devastated by the earthquake had specifically Arab, Armenian, and Kurdish communities. So do you think that this could be maybe a chance to renew cultures of self-sufficient provisioning, of solidarity amongst, the most maybe disenfranchised or marginalized communities?
It would be wonderful. It would be absolutely wonderful. And I don't know, I don't know enough about the politics. If areas which seem to be being controlled by Turkey at the moment at the top there, the Kurdish areas, but then there's some talk of possibly a new leader coming in, and perhaps that person
14th of May.
Vision.
Cross your fingers for us. My husband is voting. He's so excited.
There's what to say. It's how to get land for people. I mean, you need projects, I think, to help people be able to settle, have access to land, even if they can't afford. And I mean, there's so much poverty at the moment. I know Lebanon is very economically distraught. But yes, it's absolutely so. And I want to give a plug for our book called Pluriverse.
Yes.
Since we raised the topic of small alternatives like permaculture and commoning and bioregionalism and social ecology and what else? Yeah. Look, I'm looking at my computer and the power is going down. It's already on red, which means it's going to conk out in about, I don't know, a couple of minutes. So maybe you please continue on, but I think I'm going to have to leave very shortly.
Yes, I want to just exploit the last couple minutes with a question that was asked at the beginning, and they just told me that I didn't see. Where was it? Can we define radical? What's the criteria to be radical? Because we talked a lot in the beginning about radical feminism. Isn't anarcho-feminism radical? What about ecofeminism?
They're all radical. They are both radical. I mean, okay, they're all radical except the whole seven, except liberal feminism is not, and postmodern feminism is not. Although, of course, they would think they were. But the word radical is used. It's not used in a generic sense. That it just was historically the label that was put on those women who came out of grassroots communities and made up their own feminism out of their own life experience, and that got to be. I think it was mainly Marxist who called them radical feminists. And they looked down on them, they thought they had no analysis whatsoever and so on. So that's how the word was used, yeah. It's a good question, really. good to clarify that.
I think it's very interesting also because sometimes we keep working thinking, we know what these words or those words mean. And then at the moment we're like, okay, so, but really, what do they mean? And we should not be using them without understanding what they mean practically on the ground. Thank you so much. I don't want to pressure you with time. I would like to see if anybody would like to have any questions before concluding. Any interventions, any ideas?
Okay. I want to know.
Yes, please.
Man is hiding behind the green flower.
Sorry?
I want him to know who the man is that's hiding behind the green flower. If he would come out and say his name.
I think his name is Rowan.
Oh, hi. Yeah, it's true. Hey. Thank you. Yeah.
Of World Marching Women.
Sorry?
No.
Oh. Hear about our talk.
Well, I've been interested in like feminism for a long time now, and myself, I identify like as anarcho-feminist. And yeah, I mean, like I heard about the discussion through a friend of mine, so of course, I'm definitely interested, and I've heard about your work before that. So yeah, of course, it's amazing to join this session, and I've loved this session. I've learned a lot from it also.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm resending the link to Ariel's work or page because I sent it on the waiting room also only. There was Mariam who wanted to ask something.
Yes, hello again.
Yes.
My question is more broad, and I'm aware that Dr. Ariel might not have the time. So if it works, that this question could be addressed to her and you as well, because it's more local kind of question. So do I go ahead or?
Please do, yeah. Please.
Yes, so I would like to ask, what are the thoughts on the future of sustainability in Lebanon? Because I've just been abroad for a year now, and I'm studying in London, sustainability, social responsibility, and sustainability. And of course, if I am to compare, like the term itself is very, very common abroad, and if it's quite even played around with. But when it comes to Lebanon, it's still kind of like it's not common. Few people know even what the word sustainability means. So do we have a certain angle that we could look into to implement environmentalism or sustainability more into the Lebanese society and like with the situation of the country as it is now?
So I would start, but please, anybody should feel free to intervene at any moment. I think from my own perspective, sustainability or any kind of environmental activism cannot take place in in emptiness. It has to take place within a practically political context and linking all of these issues and rights together. And in the context of Lebanon currently, everything is destroyed, right? There's no political activism. There's no, even if we want to talk about basic rights right now, there's no interaction with the state. So I think it's pretty much, right now, it's pretty much impossible unless we can actually build a movement that links all of these together. Rights of, it's about feminism, it's about the environment, it's about right to housing, right to water, right to basic services. We cannot separate these things and just make one of them without the other. I'm just thinking out loud because of how I see things happening, right? I'm not trying to say this is absolute knowledge in no sense whatsoever. I'm just wondering, I'm starting a discussion with you, Mariam, and how can we, I mean, I do not think we can now work on any kind of, you know, quote unquote sustainable movement without it being inclusive, right?
Yes, definitely, because like you said, sustainability, it falls under different things like social, economic, environmental. So it's not just one matter. It involves many things together. I do see a bit of things going on. Like there are few people like activists or environmental activists who are playing a role or doing even small things here and there. So it's good to see that there are people who care about this, but it's what is happening is not enough. That's what also I'm understanding. It's not enough. We need more awareness. We need more people to talk about these things. And I know that there's a lot of capacity for people to take in this wave or this matter, because we do have a lot of people who are eco-conscious, but I think they just don't really get into it more because they see that not much is being done about it. So I see that there's a lot of potential, but at the same time, I want to see less challenges, or I want to see the ability to bring something. You know what I mean?
Yes, I have one question, kind of, in a way, because I started being an environmental activist in 2006, actually, and I read a little bit about what was going on before the war. And during the war, don't you think that we put so much responsibility on the individual? So where's the state, right?
Yeah.
Where are the policies? And this is why I'm trying to say we can't do it alone, separately from everything else, from the institutions. This is not one person's job. This is not a one person's responsibility. It's not about me putting, you know, plastics and paper, and then they go to the, like we know it's happening, or was happening in Lebanon, and then the whole bags go to the trash bin, and they're mixed together. So it is not about that, right? It's about actual policies. So, and unfortunately, after the Civil War, the neoliberal state destroyed the civil society, the real kind of like, again, the radical civil society, right? So whether we're talking about environmentalism alone or feminism or the left in general. So this is why I think that all of these need to exist. Cooperatives, unions, parties, an active radical civil society that can actually also pressure an actual you know, state institutions that exist.
Yes.
So yeah, this is, I think this is one of the facets of the problem. Yes, Ariel.
I've got 4% left and the thing is going to crash.
Okay.
Perhaps, Mariam, it would be good to have a look at, is it Öcalan, the man that wrote the plan for the Rojava communities? He's in prison. I'm not very sure the proper Turkish pronunciation. You know who I mean, don't you?
Yes. Öcalan? Okay.
So he has a very comprehensive plan developed in the world for sufficiency and sustainability. So I will recommend you have a look. Now I'm going to have, I can stay, and suddenly it will go black. All right. So
no, sorry. I won't have to keep you more, but please, can we write the name of this book? Is it?
The name of the man is Öcalan.
Okay. Yes. All right. Öcalan. Okay.
Okay. Thank you very much, Ariel. Thanks for our translators, Suraya and Rita. Thanks for everyone from the public. We hope you have enjoyed this, and we hope you can follow us more for more discussions and events. Hopefully in May, yes, in May we will have the lecture we had announced with Silvia Federici, and there was no way to have it. And so please follow our pages, and thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much, Ariel, and hoping to work together in the future more.
Keep touch.
Okay, thank you. Bye.